Can you imagine achieving everything they told you mattered? Degrees, honors, success, only to return home and find none of it means anything. That was me. I built a life from the ground up while my younger brother fumbled through his. Yet somehow, in our family's eyes, he remained the golden child. I was just the one who didn't need anything. This story isn't just about family favoritism. It's about the moment you realize silence isn't strength, and deciding it's time to rewrite the rules of love and loyalty. Stick around, because what I discovered inside the house I once called home would change everything. I hadn't seen the Salem sky in years, but it still looked the same, broad and blue, stretching over our family's hardware store like a postcard no one ever mailed. Returning home should have felt nostalgic, like slipping into an old hoodie. Instead, it itched. Mom had arranged dinner for my big return, but I should have known better than to expect fanfare. The moment I stepped through the door, arms laden with gifts from Charlotte Artisan chocolates, a delicate hand-poured candle, I was greeted with distracted smiles and half-hugs. The kitchen buzzed with activity, but not because of me. "Oh, Jessica," Mom said, her voice trailing off as she turned to check the oven timer. "Your brother just told us about the business loan. Isn't that exciting?" That's how it always was. Chase says business loan, and everyone cheers like he just cured cancer. I say published research, and it barely earns a nod. Chase strutted in, his ever so slightly too tight polo shirt clinging to a beer belly he pretended wasn't there. "Jesse, hey, did you see the new decals on my truck?" He pointed to the driveway, where a rusted Ford now had Wells Auto Wash slathered on the side in Comic Sans. Comic Sans. "Wow," I managed, placing the candle gently on the sideboard. "Big leap from selling used pressure washers last fall." He grinned, oblivious to the sarcasm. "Right, I'm pivoting." At dinner, it became crystal clear nothing had changed. The table's centerpiece was Mom's grandmother's vase, flanked by dishes I used to help her prepare when I was 8. I had flown in from Charlotte, just days after presenting my oncology research to a full panel of NIH advisors. But the evening star, Chase, who had almost finalized a deal with a guy named Kirk from the gym. It was unclear what the deal was or who Kirk was, but according to Dad, Chase is really onto something this time. I smiled through bites of dry meatloaf and asked myself, not for the first time, why I even came back. Because deep down, I still hoped they'd see me. My name is Dr. Jessica Wells. I graduated top of my class in biochemistry. I own my condo. I've published in 2 peer-reviewed journals. And at this dinner table, I'm invisible, except when the dishwasher breaks. Then I'm the first call. Chase toasted himself with sparkling cider. "To family," he said, raising his glass high, "and to chasing dreams." I didn't raise mine, because I already knew the truth. In this house, only one child was ever allowed to be chased after. 15 years later, the echo of that dinner still hums in my mind, like a song you never liked but somehow know by heart. Charlotte became my sanctuary. I poured myself into the lab, into work, into proving that I belonged somewhere, even if it wasn't around my own dinner table. I climbed the research ladder not by networking, but by losing weekends and skipping birthdays. My name, Dr. Jessica Wells, now sat printed beneath the header of grant-winning research on targeted T-cell immunotherapy. Colleagues respected me. My team trusted me. Strangers shook my hand with reverence. But at home, I remained the child who didn't need anything. The day I called Mom with the news of my promotion, lead researcher at Prout Labs, her response was a bland, "Good for you." Not even a full sentence. Then, just as quickly, "Did I tell you Chase's friend offered him a plot next to the strip mall for his next car wash? It's a great location. He's going to call it Chase and Suds." I didn't laugh. Not even a polite exhale through the nose. "Mom," I said gently, "this is a huge deal. It's the youngest lead appointment they've ever offered, and they want me to present in Geneva next fall." She was already distracted. "Oh, that's wonderful, sweetie. Just promise me you won't forget to wear a nice blazer on TV this time. That red one made your shoulders look so narrow." TV. She meant a local news spot from 2 years ago. That night, I stared at the ceiling in my quiet apartment and replayed the conversation like an autopsy. It wasn't just indifference. It was a pattern. A prescription I'd swallowed for decades: be exceptional, but don't expect applause. Chase, on the other hand, received standing ovations for mediocrity. His last startup, mobile dog grooming, had lasted 6 weeks. He once called me in a panic because he'd confused an invoice with a subpoena. but he was still the favored child. Chase needs encouragement, Mom would say when I pressed her. He's sensitive. And me, I was the one who didn't need attention, the responsible one, the resilient daughter, the fallback plan when things went wrong. Dad was kinder in a quiet way. He'd send me a birthday card every year with a crisp $50 bill and a note. So proud of you, pumpkin. But he never stood up for me. Not once. He never questioned why my diplomas were in a closet while Chase's participation trophies lined the living room shelves. The final straw came in the form of a group chat photo, Chase in front of a new car with a bow on it. Your brother's reward for finally paying off that $8K in parking tickets, Mom texted with laughing emojis. Persistence pays off. My response was one word. Wow. No one replied. Later, Chase messaged me privately. You okay? You've been quiet in the chat. I typed and deleted my reply 5 times. I'm fine, I eventually wrote. But I wasn't fine. I was tired of shrinking myself, of accepting the scraps of affection handed down from a family that only noticed me when something broke. I thought about all the holidays spent alone because I was too busy with work. All the family barbecues where I was praised for being so independent, while Chase's latest business blunder was met with a sympathetic round of applause. I started to see it for what it was. I wasn't resilient because they raised me to be. I was resilient because they left me no other choice. And I was done being the backup plan. 1 week later, I booked a ticket to Oregon. Dad's heart had stopped on a Tuesday morning. The obituary didn't even mention me by name. The plane touched down in Portland with a groan, the kind that sounds like an old truth resurfacing. From there, the drive to Salem was painfully familiar. Pine trees, rusted fences, a gas station that hadn't changed its prices since high school. If it weren't for the rented Kia under me, I could have sworn I was 17 again. Dad's funeral was small, somber, and somehow still skewed. Chase cried the loudest, of course, his sobs loud and unfiltered, clinging to Mom like a child who'd scraped his knee. I stood in the back pew, hands folded, the only one wearing black. The rest of the family must have missed the memo. Chase wore a track jacket. Afterward, the gathering turned into a strange celebration of my father's legacy. Old customers from the hardware store reminiscing about his corny jokes and tool belt pride. Chase held court, retelling half-true stories about working beside Dad, painting himself as the heir to some blue-collar throne. No one mentioned that I paid for the casket. No one asked how I was holding up. 3 days later, I found myself in the family kitchen with a checkbook open, sitting across from Chase and Mom at our old wooden table. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator, a sound I used to associate with late-night snacks and whispered secrets. 70%, I said, pushing the mortgage papers toward them. I'll cover it, but we need to agree on the division. Chase didn't even read the documents. Cool, Jess, you always were the numbers girl. Mom glanced at him with pride, then turned to me with a disapproving frown. Don't be so formal, sweetheart. We're family. We'll work it out like we always do. Except we never really did. Within weeks, the house began to change. My bedroom, once untouched, still smelling faintly of lavender and old high school books, became a hallway. Chase commandeered the guest room, then the living room, then the garage where he set up some kind of workshop for future ventures. Empty energy drink cans piled up beside shattered patio chairs. A broken blender sat on the counter for days. I came home from the lab to find the couch missing one leg and a stranger passed out on the rug. His name's Tate, Chase mumbled, stepping over him. He's chill. I was not. Where is the rent? I asked a week later when his share was overdue for the second time. You said you'd send it by the 10th. He laughed like I was reciting a knock-knock joke. Relax, sis, we're family. You really gonna nickel and dime me while I'm grieving? Grieving, as if I wasn't. Mom took his side naturally. He's doing his best, Jessica. He just lost his father. So did I reminded her. But I'm not treating this house like a frat dorm. Her lips pursed, eyes narrowing. You've always been so. Intense. Intense, that word again. The one they used to describe my discipline, my expectations, my boundaries, my attempts to protect the home I was financing. I started locking my bedroom door. I stopped leaving things in the shared fridge. When I came home to find my towels soaked on the floor and someone else's wet socks on my desk chair, I said nothing. But I took pictures, quietly, meticulously, because I knew what was coming. Respect, I'd learned, doesn't come naturally in this house. It has to be documented, labeled, Archived, so I began building my archive. Every beer stain, every late rent note, every violation. Because while they saw a doormat, I saw a contract waiting to be enforced. And I was done playing the part of the easy daughter. It started small. A tube of my favorite lipstick missing from the bathroom counter. A drawer in my nightstand slightly ajar. My lab notes not where I'd left them. At first, I chalked it up to distraction. Maybe I'd forgotten, maybe I'd misplaced things in the haze of grief. But the feeling stuck. That creeping, unmistakable sense that someone had been in my space. Not just passing through, but examining. I began setting tiny traps. A hair clipped between the pages of my journal. A post-it note carefully folded and placed just under my jewelry box lid. Each time when I returned from work, the evidence was clear, disturbed, moved, opened. Then the note started, slipped under my bedroom door like passive-aggressive love letters, neatly folded, always in Mom's handwriting. Don't leave your lab coat on the back of the chair. Chase thought it was trash. Your room smells sterile. Maybe open a window. Sweetheart, women who don't cook don't keep husbands. I didn't respond. I couldn't. If I started speaking, I knew I'd scream. Instead, I turned the silence into strategy. I photographed everything. Each note. Each moved item. The bent page corner of my appointment journal. The faint fingerprint left on my bathroom mirror when no one was supposed to be inside. I bought a second phone. Kept it hidden under the floorboard of my closet. Each photo, each detail, saved in encrypted cloud storage. I told no one. Not even my friend Ava, who'd been my lifeline during grad school. There was no satisfying explosion. No dramatic confrontation. Just a slow accumulation of insult upon insult. Mom would casually ask how much I spent on groceries. Then later that day, I'd find one of my protein shakes missing. She'd say she was just airing out my room, yet my drawers would be slightly out of order, the folded edges less precise. It was psychological warfare, but under the camouflage of maternal concern. You need to relax more, she'd say, running her fingers along the edge of my desk. All the science, it's making you too rigid. I started keeping my bedroom door locked at all times. Even when I was inside, I moved my grandmother's vintage perfume, my most prized heirloom, to a lockbox. And then late one Friday night, I heard the soft creak of floorboards outside my room. I waited. Then the unmistakable sound of the lock clicking, slowly, like fingers testing their luck. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. I wanted her to know I knew. The next morning, Mom acted like nothing had happened. She made Chase his usual breakfast, burnt waffles drowned in syrup, and offered me a low-carb version without asking. I declined. "Suit yourself," she said, tossing a fork in the sink hard enough to clang. That day, I bought 2 more motion sensors and installed them discreetly along my doorframe and inside my closet, because I wasn't just documenting now. I was preparing for a case. People often ask how someone as intelligent as me could let things get this far. What they don't understand is, when betrayal comes from those you love, it doesn't land like a punch, it settles like a weight. You carry it, you adjust. You tell yourself it's not that heavy, until one day you can't breathe. So you start preparing, quietly, precisely, because survival, when love has sharp edges, is an act of science. I returned from Denver exhausted, elated, and utterly unaware that my home had been hijacked. The conference had been a career high, 3 standing ovations, an invitation to consult with researchers in Zurich, and a direct offer to co-author with Dr. Hayashi, the same woman whose work first inspired my career path. I'd barely slept but couldn't stop smiling. I even bought myself a celebratory souvenir, a silk scarf, hand-dyed in violet and silver, the same colors as my alma mater. I pulled into the driveway at dusk, and immediately I knew something was wrong. There were too many cars. Some I vaguely recognized, Cousin Diane's rusty Camry, Uncle Len's oversized truck, but most were total strangers. The lawn was trampled. My mailbox hung slightly ajar as if someone had yanked at it without closing it properly. I stepped inside and my stomach dropped. The smell of pot roast hit first, not unpleasant, but not mine. Then the voices, dozens, echoing down the hallway, through the kitchen, up the stairs. Laughter, clinking glasses, a child crying somewhere upstairs. I stood frozen in the foyer, suitcase still in hand. Then Mom appeared from the kitchen, wearing my apron, and holding a tray of pigs in a blanket. "Jessica, you're home early," she chirped, not even feigning surprise. "We didn't expect you till Sunday." "It's Friday," I said flatly. I live here. She laughed lightly. Well, yes, of course. It's just we decided to host the Wells family reunion this weekend. It felt like the right time, what with your father's passing and all. She said it like she was explaining why she'd rearranged the couch, not why she'd turned my home into a banquet hall without asking. I stepped further inside. Every surface had been touched. My sleek bookshelves were crammed with family albums and kitschy figurines. My awards, my hard-earned plaques and framed articles, were gone, replaced by wedding photos, fishing snapshots, a toddler's crayon drawing with "To Grandma" scrawled across the bottom. I moved to the hallway, passing the living room where Chase was telling a story, loudly, surrounded by people who clearly thought he was some kind of local hero. "She's the brainiac, but I've got street smarts," he was saying with a grin, his arm draped around a woman I didn't recognize. My jaw clenched, but it got worse. I opened the door to my room. It wasn't my room anymore. The bed was gone. In its place, a plastic playpen, a foam mat with cartoon animals, a diaper changing station, and bins of toys spilling everywhere. My bookshelves were empty. My desk had vanished. The walls had been repainted a cheerful seafoam green. Even the doorknob had been replaced with a child-safe cover. My sanctuary had been turned into a daycare. I stepped backward, nearly tripping over a stuffed giraffe. I turned on my heel, marched to the kitchen, and confronted Mom, who was spooning dip into a decorative bowl like nothing was amiss. "What happened to my room?" She blinked innocently. "Oh, Chase needed space for the kids. You were gone for almost a week, honey. We figured you wouldn't mind." My voice shook. "Where are my things?" She waved a hand vaguely. "Oh, boxed up. Some in the garage, some in the attic. Don't worry, we labeled everything." "My grandmother's perfume," I asked, a sudden panic rising. "Where is it?" She looked confused. "That old thing, I think we donated it. It was half empty." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. It wasn't just a perfume bottle. It was the last scent I remembered from childhood, the smell of Sunday afternoons when Nana read me stories, her perfume lingering like safety itself. And they'd given it away, like it was clutter. I walked outside, sat on the porch, and tried to steady my breath. Inside, laughter erupted again. Someone turned on music. The house I'd paid for, the one I'd kept afloat, was now a playground for people who treated me like a ghost. They'd erased me, and they hadn't even thought it was wrong. But I had proof. I had photos. And for the first time, I realized something crucial. I wasn't just the daughter anymore. I was the owner. The next morning, I called Lena Morgan. She was a name I'd kept in my back pocket for years. A legal contact passed down from a colleague who'd once fought a brutal family estate battle and won. Sharp, meticulous, with a voice like polished glass, Lena didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Send me everything," she said after I outlined the situation. "Photos, receipts, title documents, texts. I'll have a preliminary agreement drafted by Friday." By the end of the week, she delivered. The document spelled it out in clean, clinical terms. I held 70% ownership of the home. Chase held 30%. Mom had zero legal claim. All future communications regarding the house must be in writing. Any changes to the property, decor, occupancy, financial obligations, required mutual consent from owners. Violations carried consequences. I read the entire thing twice, savoring the language. It was the first time in years that anything involving my family had felt fair. I handed the paperwork to Chase in the living room, where he was assembling what appeared to be a smoothie bike. He skimmed it, shrugged, and muttered, "Legalese gives me migraines." Still, he signed. I had Mom served separately. She called in a fury the moment it arrived. "Jessica, what is this?" she demanded. "Some kind of eviction threat?" "It's a boundary," I said calmly. "And it's overdue." "Oh, sweetheart, come on. We're family. We don't need to bring in lawyers." "Then maybe you should have thought twice before turning my bedroom into a nursery without asking, or giving away my heirlooms." There was a long silence. Finally, she tried one last angle. "You're tearing the family apart." I almost laughed. No, they'd torn it apart with years of gaslighting, favoritism, and revisionist history. I was just naming it. From that point on, everything changed. Lena had a contact at Cedar and Pine Property Management, a firm known for discretion and backbone. I hired them within the week. They assessed the property, updated the locks, installed fingerprint sensors on all interior and exterior doors under my domain, and set up discrete motion-triggered cameras in shared spaces. I also recorded the property title to reflect the new ownership percentages. Chase barely noticed, too busy with his latest entrepreneurial detour, now involving inflatable car wash mascots. But Mom, oh, she noticed. She texted constantly. Why are there cameras in the kitchen? Your cousin needed a place to stay. Why is the door locked? Are you spying on us now? I didn't reply. I kept screenshots. Every message, every veiled guilt trip, every comment about how you used to be our quiet little girl. No more. One afternoon, I returned home to find a passive-aggressive sticky note on my new office door. Your father would have hated this. That one I saved. Because if there's anything I've learned from years of being erased, it's this. Evidence protects your truth when love fails to. The following month was oddly peaceful. No surprise visitors, no missing items, no boundary violations. For the first time in years, I felt the space breathe with me. And just when I thought it might settle, something extraordinary happened. An email. Subject line, International Research Lead Geneva Project Invitation. They wanted me. Full funding. Relocation assistance. A team of 10. A 5-year commitment. I stared at the screen, heart racing. This wasn't just a career move, it was my exit strategy, but first I had one final step to take. I scheduled a meeting with Lena. It's time, I told her. I'm leaving the country, but I'm not leaving this house in limbo, she smiled. Then let's make sure it's bulletproof. The day Lena filed the updated ownership structure with the county, I felt something shift in my chest. A click, a seal tightening shut. Not from spite, though some might call it that, but from precision. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was protecting what I'd built. Geneva was real. The paperwork arrived a week later, an offer letter with a salary that made me blink twice and a housing stipend generous enough to cover a waterfront flat. My name in bold was followed by a title that still made my hands shake. Director of Immunotherapy Research, Swiss Oncology Institute. I had one foot out the door, but I couldn't leave until I knew everything I'd built was safe. So I gave Lena power of attorney for all U.S. properties and financial assets. My will, my bank authorizations, my shares in the house, everything was placed under clear, binding terms. If Chase defaulted, she'd act. If Mom tried to contest anything, Lena would counter. There'd be no loopholes, no misunderstandings. Next, I sat down with cedar and pine. I want my section of the house listed, I said. Furnished. 1-year lease, professional tenants only. They didn't blink. 2 weeks later, my floors were photographed, staged, and marketed as executive housing with private entrance and locked upper access. Rent checks would be direct deposited into my account. Any communication with tenants, through the management firm only. I didn't tell Chase. Not yet. The silence was already eating at him. He'd text occasionally, asking why I was so MIA lately, or hinting about us hanging out before you leave. I ignored him. Mom was less subtle. You're destroying the Wells name. You can't turn your back on your family for some European vanity project. Your father would be ashamed. I blocked her. Then came the final insult wrapped in fake apology. A group text from Chase forwarded accidentally from his banker. Need her signature before I can finalize the refinance. Refinance? My breath left my lungs. I called Lena immediately. Check the records, now. 2 hours later, her voice was steely through the speakerphone. He tried to secure a second mortgage without your approval. He can't, I whispered, even though I already knew the answer. No, she said, but that doesn't mean he won't keep trying. I stared at the wall. He knew I was leaving, and he thought my distance meant opportunity. That night, I drove to the house one last time before finalizing the Geneva paperwork. It was late, past 10. The porch was quiet. A single porch light buzzed, casting long shadows across the driveway. I unlocked the main door, stepped into the shared foyer, and climbed the stairs to what had once been my apartment. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. Clean, still, whole, and locked tight from the inside. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and opened the camera app. I filmed everything. The fingerprint lock, the new tenant agreement, the sealed office drawers, the secure attic entry. I documented the title deed again. I included a date-stamped note on the kitchen counter. This property is not for refinance. Owner approval required. Violators will be prosecuted. Then, for good measure, I emailed the footage to Lena with the subject line. Final lock. I stood at the window and looked out over the backyard where Chase once tried to build a homemade trampoline and broke his wrist. I remembered how Dad rushed him to the hospital while I was left to clean up the mess, blood on the patio, torn tarp flapping in the wind. That was always the arrangement. They broke things. I fixed them. Not anymore. As I turned to leave, I whispered one final promise to myself. This house no longer owns me. I own it. And soon, I'll leave it behind for good. 3 days before my flight to Geneva, Chase showed up at my lab. I was in the middle of reviewing patient trial data when my assistant, Melina, knocked gently and poked her head in. "There's someone asking for you in the lobby. Says he's your brother." I closed my laptop with a sigh. I hadn't told anyone at work about the family drama. This place had always been sacred ground. But there he was, slouched in one of the waiting chairs like a bored teenager, dressed in a hoodie and those awful mirrored sunglasses he never took off indoors. "Jessica," he stood up with a theatrical grin. "Look at you, Miss White Coat Big Shot." "I'm in the middle of work," I said flatly. "What do you want?" His smile faltered. "Look, can we talk somewhere private?" Against my better judgment, I led him to a small break room down the hall. He hovered near the coffee machine while I stood with my arms crossed. He didn't waste time. "I know about the rent thing. The property managers told me," he said, digging his hands into his pockets. "You're leasing your half of the house. You didn't even tell me. You didn't tell me you tried to refinance the mortgage behind my back." That shut him up. "Lena sent me everything," I continued. "The application, the forged consent form, the laughably bad signature." He turned red. "It wasn't forged, I was going to tell you. When, after the paperwork cleared and the equity was drained. I needed the money, Jess. I've been trying to build something. I'm not like you, okay? I don't have some big fancy career. I'm doing what I can. Doing what you can doesn't include theft." He flinched at the word. "It's not theft. We both own the house." "No," I said, my voice dropping. "I own the majority. I pay the mortgage. I protected the house, and now I'm protecting myself." He sat down, deflating like a balloon. "I just thought, I don't know, maybe we could run it together, you and me, family business." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You mean like we did when we were kids? You got to stock the shelves while I did the accounting, and Mom told everyone it was all your idea." He looked up at me, eyes pleading. "I'm your brother." "You're an adult," I corrected. "And adults face consequences." He stood slowly. "So that's it, you just vanish, run off to Switzerland and leave me behind." "I'm not leaving you behind," I said. "I'm stepping out of a role I was never supposed to play." He didn't respond, just looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. And then he left. No apology, no outburst, just silence. 2 days later, Cedar and Pine confirmed the first tenant lease had been signed. The deposit hit my account. I watched the notification pop up on my phone like a final period at the end of a sentence I'd rewritten from scratch. I packed light. Just 2 suitcases and my research portfolio. Everything else, books, awards, the scarf from Denver, stayed sealed in storage, waiting for a day I might want to look back. Or maybe not. At the airport, I sat at the gate with a coffee in hand, staring at the boarding pass like it might evaporate. It felt surreal, like I was stealing a future that had always belonged to someone else. But it was mine now, all mine. On the plane just before takeoff, I opened my email one last time. A message from Lena waited, subject line, "House secured, documents finalized." I clicked it open. Inside was a photo, my name on the deed. No Chase, no Mom, just one name, Dr. Jessica Wells. And beneath it, Lena's brief message. "They won't touch your world again. Go build a better one." As the plane lifted into the clouds, I let the Oregon mountains fade behind me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was running away. I felt like I was finally going home. Geneva welcomed me with sharp sunlight over glacial blue water and a silence so profound it felt sacred. The city moved with grace, like it knew its worth and didn't need to prove anything. I envied that. My apartment overlooked the Rhone, its balcony filled with lavender pots the previous tenant had left behind. I kept them. Every morning I'd open the windows, breathe in the mountain air, and think, this is mine. The Swiss Oncology Institute was everything I had dreamed of. Clean lines, endless resources, a team that functioned like a symphony. I wasn't just respected here. I was listened to. There were no condescending smiles, no "wow, you don't look like a scientist." I was Dr. Wells. Director, leader. And back in Charlotte, my life began to untangle from the house that had bound me. Cedar and Pine sent regular reports. The upper level was officially off limits to Chase, who now lived full-time with Mom in her condo across town. A family of visiting professors from Australia rented my floor. They paid on time. They left welcome flowers for the next tenants. One even sent me a thank you card. The property was finally doing what it was supposed to do, provide income, not drain it. Still, I hadn't heard from Chase. Until early one morning, 6 months after I'd left, Lena forwarded an email with the subject, "Buyout Inquiry." I blinked at it. Inside was a formal request from Chase's attorney, clumsily written but legally valid, asking to purchase my 70% share of the house at market value. I reread it 3 times. Chase wanted me out. Not to evict me. Not to cheat me. Buy me out, I called Lena. "Should I trust this?" I asked, still unsure if this was another trick. "It's legitimate," she said. "We can have it appraised and move forward if you're ready." I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep my grip on that house as a symbol, proof that I had mattered, that my roots, though cracked and twisted, still held value. But the truth, I was ready to sever the final cord. We moved fast, appraisals, counter offers, closing documents. It was strange how clinical it all felt. No emotion, no final speech, just contracts and wire transfers. And when the sale finalized, a 6-figure deposit appeared in my Swiss account. I stared at it, not with glee, but with quiet awe. Then I opened another browser tab, the Thomas Wells Scholarship. It had been a dream of mine for years, something my father once said in passing after my college graduation. "I wish we had more ways to help kids like you, Jess, the ones who don't get noticed." I'd remembered it, filed it away. Now I made it real. 20% of the house sale went directly into the fund. The rest went into long-term investments and a foundation that would support Oregon students pursuing medical research careers. I didn't call Mom. I didn't text Chase. I didn't need to. Because now when people spoke the name Wells back home, it would mean something more than backyard reunions and half-baked business ventures. It would mean opportunity, legacy, truth. And it wouldn't be about them anymore. It would be mine. Geneva in spring is almost absurdly beautiful, floral, clean, composed. But it was more than the scenery. It was the internal shift, the absence of dread, the peace of mornings untouched by unsolicited texts, veiled guilt, or the gnawing fear that someone had been in my room while I was gone. I thrived. Our lab's early immunotherapy trials showed unprecedented results. My team celebrated cautiously, driven more by the science than the spotlight. That suited me. For the first time, my success wasn't followed by deflection. There were no awkward silences when I spoke at team meetings. "No, you've always been intense," from the people who depended on me to be precise. Back home, Cedar and Pine handled everything seamlessly. The Australian family finished their lease and a pediatric neurologist from Vermont moved in. She sent me a photo of the reading nook I'd built beside the upstairs window, the same spot where I'd written my college entrance essay. She added a beanbag and called it her thinking cave. I smiled. One evening, I received a message on LinkedIn. It was from a young woman named Harper Grant, a sophomore at Oregon State. "Hi, Dr. Wells. I'm one of the recipients of the Thomas Wells Scholarship. I just wanted to thank you. My father passed away when I was 10, and I've always wanted to study cancer biology to understand what took him from us. Your support means I can stay enrolled and focus on research without taking on another job. You made that possible. Thank you, truly." I read her message 5 times. Then I cried. Not the quiet kind. Not the bitter tears I'd learned to hide. But real, liberating sobs. The kind that comes when the storm finally recedes and you realize just how much you'd been holding up. Because in that moment, I saw it clearly. All the years of being unseen, of being the strong one, the fallback plan, the silent achiever, had not been wasted. They'd been the groundwork, not for revenge, but for meaning. I sent Harper a short reply, one I hoped she'd remember: "You're not alone. And the world is better because you're in it. Keep going." After that, I closed my laptop and stepped onto the balcony. Below, the lake shimmered. The life I was building shimmered too, not perfect, not easy, but real. Defined not by obligation or expectation, but by purpose. My story didn't end with a final argument or dramatic confrontation. It ended quietly, with a woman standing alone in a new city, sipping tea from her grandmother's old mug. Yes, I'd tracked down a vintage bottle of her perfume, too, and knowing she had finally rewritten her family legacy not with fury but with intention, with boundaries, with brilliance, with grace. 6 months later, I returned to Oregon, not for family, not for nostalgia, but for the official launch of the Thomas Wells Scholarship. The event was modest but heartfelt, held in the community wing of a local hospital. My father's old customers, retired nurses, even 2 of my former high school science teachers came. Most of them didn't know the full story. They didn't need to. They saw my name, not as a footnote beneath my brother's antics, but at the top of a foundation built on something solid. After my short speech, where I spoke not of loss but of legacy, I stepped down from the podium and walked through the audience, pausing when a young man in a navy suit stood to shake my hand. "You don't know me," he said, eyes glinting. "But your brother tried to lease my parents' property last year for a car wash/coffee stand. They passed." I blinked. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "He said his sister was the investor, showed a fake email with your name. We called the bank, it didn't check out." I gave a tight smile. He nodded knowingly. "Didn't think so." It wasn't shocking, not anymore. Chase was a creature of reinvention so long as someone else footed the bill. But I no longer felt the weight of his choices dragging behind me. I'd stopped explaining, stopped defending. The distance I'd created had done more than protect me. It had reset the narrative. Later that evening, I drove past the old house. The porch lights were on. A child's bicycle leaned against the railing. Through the window, I could see a woman in scrubs making dinner. Someone else lived there now. Someone who didn't know the walls once held 1,000 quiet resentments. Good. Let it be new for someone else. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I drove to a lookout point just outside Salem. It was quiet, high above the valley, with a view that stretched for miles. I used to come here as a teenager, pretending I could see farther than my future let me. Now I wasn't pretending. I stood at the edge, the wind catching the hem of my coat, and imagined telling the girl I used to be, her knees scratched from climbing too high, her eyes always looking for approval, what we'd become. Not perfect, not easy, but free and whole. That night, before returning to my hotel, I sent one final message to myself, a promise. Never let love demand your silence. Never let family override your worth. When I boarded the flight back to Geneva, there was no ache in my chest, no regret, just the quiet triumph of a woman who no longer needed to be rescued, believed, or forgiven, because she had already saved herself. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to know, have you ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to protect you? What helped you reclaim your voice? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if Jessica's journey gave you something to think about, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories of strength, truth, and transformation. Thank you for listening. And remember, family is not defined by who names you. It's defined by who sees you, always.